Hey everybody, this is
Okay.
Josh.
And this is Jordi, and you're listening to Punt Win Repeat. So Josh, what are we doing today?
We're doing a bit of a winging it thing. So one of the biggest questions that we get asked is about threat assessment and basically how you, as a good player or as an improving player or someone that wants to improve how they play, how you determine your threat assessment. And I feel like a lot of times when people talk about threat assessment, it's like that's a heuristic study on the board. That means this player is a problem, and we should all be focusing them because they have the heuristic study. But that's not really a good heuristic for determining whether or not something is a threat that needs to be dealt with. So we're going to kind of be going through a framework really quick of basically how you can determine whether or not something is a threat that needs to be answered, and then kind of categorize the different things into categories. Categorize into categories. That's a great statement. But to kind of show you how different things play and interact when you're trying to figure out what to do. So
Yeah.
you,
For me, threat assessment is the skill and the ability to identify whether a card, a person, or a particular game action, whether that's going to be a deal or a trigger, whatever it is going to be detrimental to you winning the game, and whether that's going to be in the short run or the long run. And that can come in, again, just like we said before, it can come in many forms. Threat assessment is not really a very easy thing to wrap your head around. It's a skill that you develop over time. And we're just hoping that, like, through going over this, to some degree, you learn something. And then hopefully you can apply it in your next game. And from there, we're going to go over just like some simple questions you can ask yourself when someone puts what you might consider a threatening spell on the stack.
Yeah. So to kind of kick it off, there's first three different things that you should be asking anytime something goes on the stack, and it's going to be who, when, and why. Do you want to go over who, Jordy?
Sure. So basically, who is affected by this? So, like one example of that is going to be like a breach, a thoracle, a breeze collar. These are cards that can eliminate the entire table by themselves, and so everyone's going to be affected by it. So that should be more of a 3v1 situation where you can talk to your opponents and say, "Hey guys, this is a problem. This is going to kill us. We should really be focusing our resources on this. I might have this piece of interaction. If you have that piece of interaction, we're going to want to coordinate that in order to get the best results." The next things could be something like a stacks piece. Stacks pieces are weird threats because they don't end the game; they prolong the game, and they can make it harder for specific people to play the game. So something like a cursed totem against me, I play Tim Necrom. I don't care about that card whatsoever. But into a Kinnan or a Rogthras or a cedh, it could be a really big issue for them. And so for me, it's not a threat. And I might even protect someone else's curse totem to make sure that it actually hits the table. But for them, it's a big problem that they need to get off the table as soon as possible. That'd be one example of a threat that's not really hitting everyone at the table at the same time. And the last one's going to be any type of like a threat that's going to be threatening you in your board state. So something like a single target piece of interaction. If someone's going to be trying to Swords to Plowshares or bounce your Timna, that's something that you can take as a threat towards you and your board pieces. And a lot of times this can end up with like negotiating how powerful it actually is. But those are basically the different ways you can look at who. Who is this card affecting? That's the big thing at the end of the day.
I would also say, as a slight on top of that, evaluating how much using your own interaction hurts you, because basically every time you use a spell that stops someone else, it just means you have one less piece for the future of the board state. So in a way, it's kind of a threat too to be using your interaction. Like if I'm using 3 pieces on one person and Rogsa is coming up next, it's a threat for me to be using my stuff. Like a threat to me, I should say.
Do you want to hit up when? Like,
Yeah,
and who win.
I can do that. So when would be the next one? This kind of just is obvious. It's if there's an active win attempt on the stack, it's a problem immediately. If someone has gone Thassa's Oracle Decon, like everyone cares, it's a win. You don't have time to think about whether or not you should or should not interact. You kind of have to stop it. Next, there would be something like a Smothering Tithe or a Heuristic Study. They're problems that like spiral out of control, but if you outpace them, they won't matter. So like, it's kind of like what we said at the beginning of the video. If someone plays a Heuristic Study and you're next in turn order and you just have like Cavern of Souls, Grand Abolisher, and then like, again, Thassa's Decon, you really don't care that they have a Heuristic Study. Realistically, it's only going to draw them 3 cards off you trying to win, and it's incredibly unlikely that they'll be able to stop you. Maybe you can even pay for the Heuristic. But if you think the game is going to drag on longer, it's one of those board state presence things that'll spiral out of control. And then stacks pieces are kind of only problems to be dealt with when you'll be putting an active win attempt on the stack. So, you know, if you're planning on going for a win attempt sooner and someone plays a stacks piece that stops you, like let's say a Grafdigger's Cage, it may be more pertinent to you to be countering it instead of removing it later, because you're going to try and win on your next turn. But if you have time and you don't really care as much, you're not going for a win anytime soon, it's not really a threat to you yet. So kind of evaluating the timing of how soon you need a threat to be dealt with can kind of matter.
That's going to take us to the why, which is kind of full circle. It's the why is basically, why is it a problem? Is it a problem in the moment? Is it a problem in the long term? Is this going to stop me from winning the game? If so, when? Can I implement another game plan while I figure out that position? There's a lot of nuance to it, because a Vexing Bubble on turn 7 when you have all your mana and you don't like breach combo with LED to win, you don't really care about that. A Vexing Bubble on turn 1 when your whole hand is like Mox Diamond, Crow Mox, Mox Opal, it's like that's devastating. So really taking a moment to consider like, how does this change the scope of the game and my game plan, and how can I play around it if I can play around it? So basically that's why. Why is this a problem? You know, if it's not, move on. If it's something that's going to come up later down the line, try to figure out if you have actual answers to it. If you don't, you got to figure out a way to either get your opponents to deal with it or prepare some other game plan that your deck may have in order to play around it.
Yeah. Then kind of building on that as well, the only way to, like, dealing with problems, there's not just like one way to do it, which is I either counter it or I destroy it, and that's the only answer. Sometimes the answer to the question is having someone else answer it. So talking with your opponents is a way that you can deal with threats. Negotiating interaction, like politics basically can work with this. If, you know, you're playing against, let's say, an Ob Nixilis, and they don't have their commander in play yet, and someone else plays a Drannith, it's possible that Drannith just completely locks them out of the game. And it's also possible that you can talk that Ob Nixilis player into killing that Drannith for you, you know, and you could maybe even take advantage of it first, because they need it gone as well. But you wouldn't really get that without talking to your opponents.
This is like a situation that I see a lot where someone sees a stacks piece comes down and they look at like this, let's say Null Rod or Collector, whatever it is, Drannith Magistrate. They look at that piece and like, I need this gone now, I can't deal with it, I'm just going to kill it in your end step. And they're not thinking about like, all right, well, if I just wait until the next player's turn, like I just wait for it to get back to like the end step before my turn starts, I can leave the stacks piece in play for everybody else. It's working for me that whole time. And then when it comes to my turn, I can unlock myself by just killing it immediately. And if I don't need to kill it immediately, I can use that stacks piece to my advantage, maybe even to a higher degree than the person that cast it.
Yeah. Even if things are threats to you, you have to kind of look at them as, well, it could be a threat to my opponent as well. So kind of moving on there, we have a couple different categories for different types of threats that we can go over. Jordi, you want to go through the 3 types?
Yeah, so we kind of hit lightly on them before with just like the immediacy of the game actions you need to be taking to combat them in the who, when, why. But the 3 types that we have here are going to be lethal threats, value threats, and positional threats. Just like loosely going over them, I'll go over lethal threats real quick. These are threats that are immediately going to be setting up a win or putting a win on the stack. These are things that are happening immediately. And
you basically can't ignore
money
them.
tier 1 threat. What's up?
I was going to say, like, the lethal threats are the ones where they are winning now. You don't have an option to not interact. It's either you do or you die. And figuring out if something resolving is a lethal threat can be important, because sometimes a lethal threat will look like one of the other 2 types that we'll get into in a second. But if you identify it as, no, this is lethal, then you kind of don't have a choice. You're going to interact.
Yeah. For me, lethal threats and the next category of value threats, they can actually be categorized like very similarly depending on the deck that you're playing or you're playing against. Like, for me, in cedh, Smothering Tithe is a lethal threat.
Yeah.
That card, I mean, unless you're winning immediately after that card hits the stack, like you get to untap and then just win, if that card, if it gets back to them, they're probably going to kill you.
Yeah. Unless, like, cedh's not in play. Like, if they play a tithe and they pass and you kill it in end step, then it's like, now it's a value threat that basically means you have 1 turn. But in general, it's going to be lethal. Kind of touched on it a little, but the second one was value threats. So it's cards that don't win immediately, but dramatically accelerate someone's ability to win. So that's going to be your Mystic, Ristic, Necropotence, Smothering Tithe, like we just talked about. They generate just like ridiculous amounts of value, and the value is variable depending on what deck is casting them. So for instance, Smothering Tithe and cedh, like, it's a value threat. It will very quickly elevate to a lethal threat, but it doesn't necessarily win by itself.
Yeah. I put an example here of, Ristic, Mystic. Necro, Adnaz, these are cards that kind of accelerate that value to the degree where it's just going to win the game. And so these are cards that, even though they're generating a ridiculous amount of value, in reality they're putting enough cards in X player's hand to just win the game more than likely that turn.
Yeah. There's also like lesser degrees of it too. Like a value threat could be a Lotho, it could be a Tataru, it could be a Timna. It's basically just things that push people ahead. And maybe you don't care about them all the time. Like maybe a Timna exists and their attacks are bad, so it's like it's a value threat, but it's not really elevated to the level where you need to deal with it. And then you want to go.
And then the last thing is position. Yeah, last one's positional threats. These are cards that can make it difficult to gain advantage or shift the status of the game to a degree that is going to make it difficult for either you to win or anyone to win. So I feel like we keep bringing up like Ristic, Mystic, and Smothering Tithe. And these are cards that can also shift into positional threats. Of Ristic is going to be very hard to win through. A lot of times, whether it's Mystic or Ristic Study, if you end up pushing into those cards, you're going to probably hit a wall at some point unless you win very quickly after you start pushing into those cards. And so other example, like positional threats are probably the most variable because, like I mentioned before, something like a Vexing Bubble or a Wheel or any number of cards can seem fairly innocent, but they can also be indicators of what's in people's hands. So if someone goes Vexing Bubble or Wheel, so if someone goes like Wheel, put a Wheel on the stack, and let's say one player has like 3 cards, one player has 6 cards, the other player has 6 cards, and then the person that's casting the wheel has 4 cards, and the player with 3 cards counters it. They probably have a very good last 2 cards in their hand. I would assume something to put together a win, or something that just goes way over the top of whatever a wheel was going to give them. So a lot of times what people do and how they respond to a positional threat is going to tell you a lot about what's in their hand or what their game plan is.
Yeah. There could also be positional threats, kind of like. Sorry, I was going to go over like Bowmaster. Like if there's a Bowmaster in play, and like a lot of the value that you're generating is creature based, maybe that Orcish Bowmaster, even though technically it's not going to lose you the game, it's not going to provide your opponent insurmountable advantage, but maybe that OBM resolving and blowing up your board is a huge positional threat to you, because if they do that, you're going to need like 4 more turns to reset back up and find an answer to the Bowmaster. So it could make your position much harder, and that elevates its threat status when you're evaluating whether or not you need to do something. Sorry to cut you off. You were going to talk about Vexing Bauble.
That's okay. I think, Vexing Bauble, I feel like I went over it pretty well, but basically just going over how if you need to cast a bunch of free spells to win, like in a Breach combo, and someone's going like, everyone looks like they're in like a setup position where they're just kind of putting out a couple value engines, and then someone slams a Vexing Bauble and then it gets like Force of Willed. For me, that's a gigantic red flag. Like, this guy's got something in his hand. He's going to try to go for something.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes the positional threats kind of are not so much threat assessment per se. It's like the way that people react and the way that people are, using their resources can just tell you what's going on and inform you about whether or not they're going to be a threat soon.
It's actually one of those situations where being last in priority, or I guess like going last, is kind of like a benefit to you, because you get to see how everyone else reacts to the spell that's on the stack.
Yeah.
So use that. Definitely use that. You don't want to have to jump in front of somebody else when they're going for something.
Absolutely.
The next section we want to go over is like common misassessments and like why they happen. And the first one I have here is counter the spell, not the tutor. I mean, this one's pretty obvious. I'm sure people here have been in the position of like someone puts a demonic tutor on the stack, and then someone says, no, don't counter the tutor. Like, just counter the thing that they get. They probably have like they're gonna go for like a Necro or something, and then they just slam Grand Abolisher on you. It's like, oh, I don't have an answer to that. Like, I can't solve that.
Yeah.
So, the big one is usually like a mental misstep. Someone goes like Vamp Tutor for mental misstep, or like Decon for mental misstep or something. And it's like, no, like, if the interaction is narrow enough and the spell that they're casting is scary enough, like, just use the interaction that you have available to you to make sure that they can't get the spell that you can't stop.
Yeah.
The other thing I would recommend is, like, these are also positions where counter the spell, not the tutor. You can counter the tutor by showing the counter spell and saying, hey, instead of getting X card, if you just agree to get this card instead, I'll let it resolve. I'm cool with this, but I'm not cool with that. These are deals that, like, it really depends on how people are going to be taking that type of deal, because some people are going to say, nah, just counter it, I'll move on. But typically, at least in my experience, it's more conducive to be like, to be willing to negotiate on that, so you get at least a little bit of value, and someone keeps your counter spell in hand for the next person that's going for something.
Yeah.
But that's my experience. Your mileage may vary.
Yeah, there's definitely scenarios where you have to kind of like, obviously counter the spell, not the tutor, has some merit, because it like, sometimes it is correct. If your answer is a Force of Will, and you're pretty sure they're not going for like a Hexing Squelcher or something that's uncounterable or whatever, maybe it is correct to let the tutor happen and get the thing afterwards. But Jordi already said it. Like, the more narrow your spell is that interacts, the more likely it is you should probably just be hitting the tutor. Like a vamp or whatever, if your answer is a mental misstep, you probably just fire it off. But again, it kind of also goes back to how threatening their position is. Like, if they have no cards in hand and like one land, you know, they're probably going for a Remora. But, you know, someone like that.
You also have to take that into account. Like, some people, like, that's going to get into a whole other thing of whether your deck is a board deck versus a hand deck, and that's probably a whole other video that we can do of how lethal is someone looking, and is that going to be dependent on their board state, or is that going to be dependent on how many cards are in their hand? Something like cedh, they just need mana. So whenever a cedh player goes, "Oh no, don't worry about me, I just have one card in hand," I hit that with a lot of scrutiny because they don't need cards in hand to win the game. Their commander's a tutor; it gets their whole combo.
Yeah. That actually leads really well into that leads really well into the next topic.
Yeah, go for it.
Baiting the fish one. So this one labeled baiting the fish is if people are getting overly aggressive on a non-lethal or non-value threat, you'd be looking at them with more scrutiny because they may be trying to bait interaction in spots that would benefit them. It's kind of a tool that you can use for how and what your opponents are willing to communicate. So, like, in the same thing where cedh is saying, "Oh man, like, don't worry about this thing, like, it's no big deal." It could be like the most important thing in their deck. Like, if they're resolving a tithe, you probably should just be like, no. But it's also possible that they're like, you know, playing a Feyburrow Elder or something, and they have a tithe as a follow-up, and they're trying to be like, no, Feyburrow's not that big a deal, even though it is, to get you to do something. And then they resolve the more powerful spell afterwards. It kind of just goes into like the way people play and the way they react to table talk, or if you start like holding priority on a spell. Just use that to inform your decisions.
And then the next one I want to hit on is the I need to save my interaction, which I hear that a lot, and that situation of I need to save my interaction, a lot of times it's either in situations where people are misunderstanding what the board state looks like the threat assessment is low, and so they may not realize that the deck in front of them is slowly developing this insurmountable advantage that regardless of the interaction that's in your hand, if you don't keep them from it now, you will never be able to use it again. And so that's just a misunderstanding of what's in front of you. Decks like cedh, decks like Kinnan, decks like Magda, these are decks that if Magda just has an instant speed treasure maker in their hand, like Bottle Cap Blast, if they have 3 treasures and they're saying, I only have 3 treasures, don't worry about me, you know, you can take that with a grain of salt, but just remember that they can always just like put something into play and then now you can't do anything about them. If they get to that 5th treasure, that could be a real issue for you. Same thing for cedh, same thing for Kinnan or Rogthras. Rogthras gets 6 creatures in play and then Cradle taps for 6, and that's scary. If they have any way to put a Boral Breeze Color into play, that's going to be a long turn for you. So just understanding that, like, I need to save my interaction. I think in those situations where you go, I need to save my interaction, if there's multiple pieces of interaction at the table, you can talk to the people there and say, like, I need to save my interaction. Makes sense if you're looking at Force of Will. And you go like, no, I think that my interaction is like very, very good here. But like it's very like all encompassing. I think it's better if we use like your Pyroblast in this situation. I understand you want to save it, but this is gonna like be better for us in the long run. Especially if you're not pushing for one in your turn, you can make a lot more arguments towards that situation. Again, take this with a grain of salt. Lots of rules of thumb here, but these are tools you can use throughout the play of the game. Just to, one, be honest and open with your opponents of like, we need to deal with this. I can deal with it. I don't want to, but I don't want to because this is a much better answer for everything that's going on versus this one specific thing. If there's a 1-drop on the stack that looks very, very threatening, and you're like, hey, does anyone have like mental misstep here? I really don't want to have to use this Mindbraid trap on it. There's like a Darko Timna player up next. Like, we should probably, figure something out here. So it's just very important to relay to the table why you don't want to use the interaction if it's that piece of interaction, and why there's might be better use in that situation. Another good example is just like offer you can't refuse. It's like, I don't want to give this guy, this Kinnan player, 2 treasures. That could be very lethal for us. If we can give him a bird instead, I think it's going to be better for us.
Yeah, for sure. Saving interaction only matters if it actually stops the person and you get to see another turn. Like, if you mess it up and you save it and someone ends up with a Grand Abolisher in play, you're going to feel really stupid. Next part. Something kind of important to think about as well is that threat assessment is an ongoing process. All of the stuff that we've talked about is not something that you do once and then move on from. It's entirely possible that someone plays heuristic study and you don't evaluate it as a threat because you're trying to win next turn, but then you get stopped and now they have like 6 extra cards. Now all of a sudden that threat that you weren't worried about is a pretty big deal. So this kind of introduces this loop that we're going to talk about of what you can do when you're thinking about your threat assessments. Jordi, you want to go over the steps?
Yeah, so during each action, you should be trying to assess like board states and positions. I alluded to it before of look at what resources are available to the table and each individual. If the numbers are fairly even, you should feel relatively comfortable in those positions. If everyone has 5 lands in play, 5 cards in hand, that's a fairly even position, and I kind of like assessing that kind of like that. Obviously, different decks, mana is more important or cards are more important, but just to give you an overall example of just assess the board position as best you can through each turn cycle and through each game action. Obviously don't take like 4 minutes trying to assess it, but just do like little updates in your head of like, all right, so this person's used this person's used that, or this person's lost this threat, or like this person got their breach exiled. Like, these are things that you can kind of keep running in the back of your mind of like why you wouldn't need to worry or why you may need to worry more about different people at the table. So it's just like continuous loop of thinking about that. The next thing is like tracking what interaction has been spent. This is also kind of like an experience thing. And there's 2 ways to read into that. The first way is, as an experienced player, typically you can follow along with what interaction has been used and what interaction most people play. Everyone who's playing blue usually has 1 Force Will in their deck. If there's 2, good for you, you get to call the judge. So it's really good to keep track of that type of stuff because there's only so many free spells. There's only so many 1-mana interaction spells. If someone starts counting your spells and now they're counting Storm Count, you have a pretty good idea that there's Fluster Storm in their hand or a Mindbreak Trap. And these are all things you can keep track of as you go through. The next thing that you want to keep track of, or just have kind of running as you're playing through your turns, is when someone has like a risk study out and they've drawn 10 cards, 12 cards, whatever it is, and they have open mana, but they're passing on literally everything to you, more than likely they're sandbagging something. If they're not sandbagging something, more than likely they have some type of win in their hand. Like if a TNK player has 12 cards in hand and they've passed on every spell with mana up, I would be worried. I would not be looking to interact. I'd be looking to get more information from what's in their hand. Because if they're telling me there's no interaction in there, I'm gonna call bullshit. Because there's no shot that in 12 cards, no interaction with men up. Get out of here. And then, based off of those things, you want to adjust your line. If this person keeps passing to you, pass on it. If you die, you die. But if they're not willing to feed you information or give you some semblance of what's going on, then that's on them more than it is on you, at least in my opinion.
I agree with that. Like, game state information is valuable. Like, if seat 1 is going for it, seat 2 has heuristic and they're drawing a ton of cards, and they have, like, 4 mana up and they're also passing on everything, you kind of have to do the math in your head and be like, okay, if I blow everything to stop this one person and it just goes to the next turn and I die, my interaction might have actually stopped the person after, but it only works if the person in second seat actually has to use some of their stuff to make sure they don't lose. So kind of knowing your place and how your interaction is like positioned at the table to do the most good for you is really, really important.
This kind of leads us into the last, like, part 5 of our kind of framework for threat assessment of don't let someone yap you, make you think that you're using interaction that's going to benefit the table or benefit your own game plan, when in reality you're benefiting someone else's game plan. You want to make sure that whatever you're doing, it's in benefit of your plan, and that you adjust your plan as the game progresses. If you can sit back and you can develop a board state and you can develop resources, and there's no immediate threats or no value threats that you're in contention with, do that. Because the more resources you have going into the turn that you want to go off, the better it is for you. But at the same time, if you're the person that has, 4 pieces of interaction, and there's another person that's just drawing cards and gaining value over the entire table, don't use interaction in favor of their game plan. Do it to service your own. Make sure that you get to your turn. Whether that's through making some type of deal with that player, whether it's through tapping out for your game plan and saying, hey, I'm not going to have anything up. If you want to deal with it, you deal with it. I'm doing my thing. That's totally fine too. You can't live in fear. You have to, at some point, push your agenda.
Yeah. It's definitely important. I think maybe the most important thing, if you only take away one thing from this whole video, is that anytime you're dealing with threats or interacting, you should be doing so with the purpose of serving your own game plan. Don't be bullied into situations where people are like scouting you for information, or you should really be looking at yourself too and being like, is the way that I'm reacting revealing the fact that I have Mindbreak Trap in my hand? Is the way that I'm playing revealing the fact that I have a silence? And are other people taking advantage of that because they know that I'll use it if they pass priority? Your threat evaluation should also be taking into account what you think that other people might think you have. So yeah, play for yourself. Don't play to save other people. But also understand if you have to.
One thing I think is really cool. One thing I think is really cool is, as you get better at threat assessment, you can start reading into other people's threat assessments, which I really love. That's something that, like, as someone is like progressing through the game, and maybe they look at like risky study and they kind of just like scoff or like, oh, you need to counter this risky study. It's going into my turn. I'm going to feed them like 4 cards. It's like, what cards are you feeding them? What are you talking about? Like, what is this? And you can start reading a little bit more about like what they're doing and how they're doing it and how they react to certain cards. Like, if someone puts a Necro on the stack and like somebody doesn't even blink, it's like, okay, this guy has a game plan. This guy's going to probably go for his, like, he's probably going to push for win on his turn if he doesn't give a fuck about a Necro. Like, that's a big tell. Something's happening. Something's going on. So how people react to things is also really big.
Yeah, it's possible that they've like read the situation as, oh, they tapped out to play this Necro, so there's no way that they're going to actually push this turn, and I'm pushing on my next turn. So why would I care if they sculpt a 7? They have to hit like exactly Force of Will, Mindbreak Trap to stop me, I don't think it's going to happen, so I don't care.
Mm.
But yeah, I think that's basically it, no?
Yeah, I mean that's the framework. That's a real like large framework for threat assessment. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions on this, and if there's already questions, you can always reach out to us, and we'll give you the best answers we possibly can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. We're both pretty active on the Discord, so feel free to ping us with questions. But outside of that, I think that's all we have for you today. Keep it short and sweet. We do have our 10K coming up October 10th and 11th in South Florida at Guildhall. It's called the Sunshine Showdown. We're very excited for it. And you should definitely sign up. Outside of that, I think that's all we got for today. So we will see you next time. Cat.
Bye.
Goodbye.